Hello, I'm going to analyze a game I just played. 2043 is me and 2022 is him. He has white and he starts with B3 um, with the idea of bishop to B2 and then controlling the board from there. Um, Fighting for the center indirectly, but immediately. And by playing that on the first move, I assume he knows this opening, and but it's also not the best. Um, so I play e4 or e5, and then sure enough, he plays bishop b2, attacking my pawn, which I knew would be attacked, but I chose to play e4 because sometimes e4 can't be played because of a pawn on d4 or a knight on f3. And I feel like e4, because he's playing with the white pieces and not doing anything really in the beginning, I feel like what's the best move I can play? Something that opens up my king side so I can castle potentially, or just grabbing the center because I do know he's going to do this. So here you could play d6 and defend the pawn, but that would just, I like playing d5 and just kind of really getting as much space as I can. So I don't want to play d6 because it's going to get in the way of my pieces. So I decide to play f6. And the reason I play f6 is because it's in the direction of this bishop. So rather than defending it like kind of indirectly, where if something happens, the bishop sees, in this way it has triple defense. So this bishop his whole plan of his bishop being here is just all day being blocked by my pawn chain. Alright? Now the risk of this move is the queen can check the king on h5. And the king has trouble in some variations because sometimes he has to move. Because if a knight is on f3, for example, when the queen's on h5 and or maybe it's when the knight's somewhere else. But anyway, sometimes the knight can sacrifice and I can't take back because the queen on the h file will take the rook. So this h pawn does not defend the g pawn. When you play the g pawn to block the queen attack, sometimes it doesn't work. But, so he immediately gets his queen able to check me. And here I play d5 because I'm claiming the full center and blunting his bishop and allowing the check. And he immediately delivers it. And here I'm thinking about moving my king. There's no piece I can play to block it other than a pawn. And sometimes playing a pawn move like this around a queen and with your king like this, with all this space, is dangerous because the queen can shuffle around and attack weaknesses. For example, here if I develop the knight in front of the king, he'd play queen takes f6, attacking my rook. But here I just developed my bishop behind my pawn that I pushed, filling in the pieces. This pawn that had to push to block the queen was no longer defending this square, so putting the bishop here defends this square. Also, there was a pin going on with this pawn and my queen, so by doing this, if he were to take my pawn and I were to take back, he can take my queen, so I have to think about that. But it doesn't work in that variation. And then here I block, and my king can castle in this direction, but that'd be dangerous because the queen, his knight, is adding layers to this because he's thinking maybe pawn up and then taking, but he's building up pressure on this point. And but he decides to develop his bishop here. And then I attack his queen with the idea of That's why I played my knight to here, because I want to go here and attack the queen, and the queen is attacked and it can't go to this square, so it can swing over here. But if it were to stay on this, like near my king, where my king is planning on castling potentially, if it were to stay here, it would be subject to discovered attack from my bishop, because my bishop is defending my knight. So he goes all the way over here and checks me, and I'm happy with my position here, and I just play knight defends the check, develops a piece out of my back row, blocks my check. He can't immediately. Normally, in these types of positions, he probably beats people all the time with all the pressure he has with his bishop and knight and queen. The queen pins the bishop, or the queen pins my knight to my king, so my knight does not support e5, which his knight and bishop attacks. But because I have a pawn on f6 from my very second move, this pawn is always very well protected. So here he decides to, after retreating his bishop, after only deploying it here, he decides to fully deploy it here before castling, which is, again, he's thinking if I make a lazy move, he can take the knight, and if I take back, he takes with the queen with check, and then potentially the rook. So I block the pin. All right, now he plays bishop. His trusty bishop goes to here, and it tries to prevent me from castling and get into the game, have some influence. But I don't really care because I'm planning to attack this bishop, because if the bishop takes my knight, I'm sufficiently well defended, and I can just take back with an attack on the queen, and my bishop is good here. So he goes in for that, and I take back with the attack on the queen, and the queen has no good way to avoid being attacked and also do something, because normally it would be able to sidestep and attack this pawn, but the pawn is defended by the bishop because of the way I developed my queen side. So I chose to, because a lot of people would just block with the bishop here, but I chose to bait him into this, knowing that I have time to block the pin and then play that move. And it's a real threat because the rook is protected by the queen. And then, so he takes, I take, he goes here, and now here I'm thinking about castling, but I'm also thinking about, well, I have this forcing move to calculate b6, which attacks his queen. And right now, if I immediately attack his queen, which a lot of players would do, he would retreat to c3. And from c3, he can go back here if he needs to. He can go here. He influences the center, and he's safe. I can't attack him, because if I play d5, the pawn and the knight and the queen will all fight for that square, so I don't have enough. And so it's not good to attack the queen here. Instead, I immediately attack with d5 in the center, because it opens up my bishop, which attacks the knight. And if he does nothing, I can always take the knight, and then he has to take back, and then that's a bad structure I can exploit with my queen over there. But I never do that. I never really take knights with bishops. So another idea of this move is, normally when you play a move in the center, you have to worry about them just taking the square that you just left, because this pawn protects this square. So by moving it, this pawn no longer protects the square, so he can play the move e4 and attack my knight and avoid the tension in the center. However, he can't play that move because bishop takes e4. So my bishop controls and makes this push super strong. And this is the best move by the engine here. And he panics here and just collapses, but he's already lost. But he moves his king up, which I thought was, I didn't know this at the time that he was completely lost, but the computer knows. So in this position, I'm thinking, how do I get to his king, right? Maybe pawn takes and break through somehow, castle, right? Get the rook in. But no, I realize, what have I accomplished? What's different about this position? Well, in this position, the queen no longer has access to the square. I have gained uh, on the battlefield. Okay, so now when I attack the queen, I have this all calculated that the queen is dead no matter what she does. So she goes here, but then I have this move, and the bishop and the pawns cover all the squares. The queen cannot check because the rook and the bishop, and cannot go here because the knight and the queen, and cannot go here because the pawn and the queen cannot go here. So all my dark squares are covered, and all my light squares are covered. That's what you have to think about. So he has dark square superpower, but it's not enough. And so he slides to the side, and then here, it's funny, I actually miscalculated. So from here, when I'm attacking the queen, I played all the best moves, but I thought I had him dead with this diagonal here, the bishop pinning the queen to the king. But if I play that right now, he would just play queen takes bishop, attacking my king, and the game is in his favor. So how do I prepare bishop to here? Also, if I play the wrong move, like knight, somewhere, like back here, for example, he can take my bishop with check and also win the game. So although I've played all the best moves, now my plan didn't really work because I have no immediate access to there. So I play a quiet queen d2, and now the threat is real, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. And he plays this move, which protects the king, and it's the best move by the engine, but it's not enough because this bishop move, there's nowhere for the queen to retreat to, and she can't go anywhere. So he just resigned here. And I also could have played this move, and there's also nowhere to go. So I just had to calculate every single square. But in my head was with the king, so if he played on like something like I'm not sure what he would try. Nothing works because I have such a good knight here and bishop protecting the pawns, and haven't committed my king. And all right, so let's look at the engine. The engine always immediately is like, give away your pieces and then attack. And then the engine's always like, don't save the knight. But what if you did save the knight? Then attack, check, takes. That's a ridiculous move. Like, that makes no sense. Like, that'd be normal. Okay, threaten, take. Always take back. And then in here, you gotta play this move. Okay. My pawn's in my own way. Okay. Bishop takes, knight takes, rook takes, bishop takes, queen check, bishop blocks, queen check, king up, check, 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 and mate. All right, so interesting. So the best move from the computer is to play the queen one, but I did the king one, and it's still equal. And now best moves to defend it with the knight, but I played this move, giving him a slight edge because I'm vulnerable. He immediately goes for it, but I play the best move here, and then he should take the center, but he immediately gets too aggressive, which allows me to kick him back without damaging my structure. And then here, interesting development suggested by the computer, knight protected by the bishop, then probably rerouting to this square. However, I found this move, which is equally good. I think better, but whatever. And then here, play the best move again. So this is a lot. Like after this little choice I make, it's best move, slight variation, 0.7, 0.7. It's like the same. And then best move, so I could say best move. And then attacking the queen, which isn't the best move because I'm allowing the queen check. And I admit I didn't see that, but knight here is good. Because then I can play knight here, and then I can play bishop here, and then best move, 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 and then resigns here. Let me refresh. Yeah, that's the end of the game. So yeah, hope you learned something or had fun.